Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I want to let you know we will allow time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar, so please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. Next slide, please. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. Next slide, please. We serve a very broad client base. Next slide, please. Spanning all industries. Next slide, please. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Greg Fagan, who is the Sales Director for the Publishing and Financial Industries at DCL. Greg has over 25 years of experience in the publishing industry and has held key positions in production, editorial, and product development at major publishers and vendors such as Wiley, McGraw-Hill, Elsevier, Silverchair, and Alexander Street Press. Without further ado, welcome Greg.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks to all of you for tuning into today's webinar. So you're implementing a new content management system, or maybe you're upgrading an existing one. This means that you're serious about organizing your content to make it more searchable and retrievable, and that you're probably keen to reuse and repurpose your content in multiple ways and to multiple outputs. That's good business practice, and it's something that every organization that provides content should do. Delivering your content to your users in the way that they want it is critical to your overall success. So now that you've decided to move forward with this new content management system, what's next? Any content system requires content to be in some kind of structured format. In most industries, from publishing to financial services to aerospace, just to list a few examples, that structure will likely be some flavor of XML. But which XML schema should you use? There's Ditto, there's DocBook, there's XHTML. Is one better or more appropriate than the others? Sure, you have a plan for the new content that you'll be entering into your CMS, and you very likely have an authoring tool designed to work with that system. But what about your legacy content? How many years worth of content do you have? How is it currently stored? Mostly paper, PDFs, bound books? And what's your plan for integrating it into your content management system? Do you need to convert all of your content now, or can you prioritize and do it in stages? These are all important considerations, and hopefully you've thought about them before you decide to implement a new content management system. Think about your business drivers for developing a CMS. Is the goal to publish to multiple channels, print, web, mobile apps, streaming audio, video? Is it to reuse your content across your enterprise from a single source so that you can streamline content creation and avoid redundancies? Do you want to make updating your content easier? Or maybe you've seen the inefficiency of converting your content multiple times for different outputs. More than likely, your business drivers involve some combination or even all of these reasons. After all, the whole point of implementing a content management system is to get your content into a structure that provides greater control and flexibility. In addition to the financial challenges of converting content from one source to another multiple times, the content can't simply be moved from one design to another. Content for books is written to be read from beginning to end. This approach creates dependencies that make it difficult to use the same content in a different order or for a different purpose, such as a mobile app. For example, wording such as "in the previous chapter" isn't appropriate in a non-book experience. Non-XML sources embed the formatting into the content. When an author applies a format in a source file, such as InDesign, the styling is embedded into the content. Because this styling isn't usually applicable in another deliverable, the formatting must be updated for each deliverable type. Tool-specific files lock your content into a dependency on the functionality, including output generation for that tool. All of these factors contribute to limiting the delivery possibilities for your content. So you need XML, but which schema? For the most flexibility across all content types, my recommendation would be Ditto, which, if you're not familiar with it, stands for Darwin Information Typing Architecture. Ditto is an open standard for creating, managing, and publishing modular content, which is what will be stored in your content management system. It supports the definition of new content types within a comprehensive ecosystem, and it's been increasingly adopted across a wide range of content disciplines and industries. So why Ditto? A few years ago, the common wisdom that if you were developing narrative content, you should use DocBook, and if you were developing modular or topic-based content, you should use Ditto. That was true to an extent, but was always somewhat misleading in my view. Books can be written with Ditto, and modular content can be authored with DocBook. Ditto has really advanced in the last couple of years to the point where I think it's superior to DocBook, especially when implementing a content management system. Ditto can be published to all outputs, and it can be easily customized or specialized, to use the preferred terminology of Ditto advocates, to many different content types, such as educational, financial, and legal, just to name a few. You can produce both HTML5 and EPUB with readily available open source tools from Ditto. That's important for the development of mobile content, apps, and enhanced ebooks. And while both have their strong points, Ditto is the more flexible schema of the two. It can do everything DocBook can, but the reverse isn't always true. For example, Ditto is better suited to granular storage of content that you see in most content management systems. What about XHTML? Although it's often thought of as one, XHTML is not a true schema. It's really a document styling format and thus not structured enough for a CMS. One of the essential functions of any content management system is that it should support most, if not all, target outputs. And Ditto provides both a consistent XML structure and the flexibility of specialization to do that. How many of us foresaw the advent of all the current deliverable types 5 years ago? Can you predict the quantity or variation of the deliverables your company will need to meet changing user needs in the next 5 years? If you separate your content from its delivery now, which is what a good CMS does, then you don't have to try to predict the future. Instead, you can future-proof your content so that it's ready to be transformed into whatever outputs your customers need. Now, it's one thing to do that with new content, piece of cake, right? You simply set up templates and tools that integrate with your CMS. But what about legacy content? That's a different challenge, so let's talk about that. Integrating your legacy content with a new content management system is no easy task, but with a logical, well-planned approach, it's not as daunting as it might seem. A phased approach makes a lot of sense, as it helps you avoid costly mistakes, like realizing you've implemented a system that doesn't work before you get too far down the road. Prioritizing and converting your content in stages, doing some conversion and learning more about your content requirements before choosing a CMS, and running small pilot programs before getting locked into a content management system at a cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars are all good examples of a phased approach. With that in mind, let's discuss some relevant Ditto and content management system lessons in detail. DCL recently conducted a series of interviews with Ditto implementers at 12 companies. The intent of the study was to better understand the reality of live implementations versus the perceptions that exist in the industry. We promised anonymity so we could ensure the results would be representative of the group's actual findings. So why Ditto? The top 3 answers we got were as follows: reduced need for composition, content reuse, and reduced translation costs. All 3 resulted in cost savings, decreased time to market, and improved internal efficiencies. This isn't surprising. We know from our own years of experience that having content in a structured format within a content management system has many benefits, with these 3 among the most cited. What were the business drivers? The top answer to this question was the ability for various teams to multi-purpose content to suit their particular requirements. Utilizing chunks of content for multiple purposes dramatically reduced costs and improved overall reliability. I referred to multi-purposing in an earlier slide, and it's highly likely that it's at or near the top of any organization's list for moving to a structured content format within a CMS. One of the questions we posed was, how long did it take? Average implementation took about 3 years. Some took 2, others 5. Some of the respondents believed implementation to be an ongoing process that was never finished. Across the board, however, it took far longer than planned. This one came as a surprise to us, but there are ways to speed the process. After all, time is money. When did they choose their content management system? Half of the respondents selected their CMS at the beginning of the process. The other half followed after running various pilot programs. The companies that selected a CMS later started doing conversion and getting comfortable with the data first, then selected a CMS when they had a better understanding of their own data requirements. 2 of the companies had switched from their initial selection to another content management system during the testing phase, which highlights the value and wisdom of running small pilot programs before full implementation. Absent that testing, they might very well have continued down their respective paths with content management systems that weren't meeting their needs. That would have meant large sums of money spent for poorly implemented solutions, and it also would have resulted in walking papers for those decision makers in all likelihood. How was success measured? Once again, the ability to multi-purpose content was the #1 criterion for measuring success and return on investment. Some of the notable savings came from the improved ease and efficiency of the following: publishing content in multiple formats such as PDF and print, developing training and help systems, customizing marketing and sales collateral, changing styling, layout, and design while maintaining the copy, and producing HTML and ebooks since content was standardized. We posed the question of how are you maximizing the benefits of content reuse? Only 2 of the 12 companies we interviewed were actively taking advantage of content reuse. We were surprised by this as well. Those 2 companies had decided up front to build an extensive rewriting phase into their implementation plan. While this additional phase extended the implementation time, the upfront planning was critical to the success of their overall projects. The most common reasons for not implementing a reuse plan up front included projects being too large for anyone to manage or that required too much rewriting. Notably, many also mentioned the drastic change that would be needed for their writers to move to a more modular writing mode and to work more collaboratively and with more guidelines than they were typically accustomed to. We also asked about translation and how often that was needed. 4 of the 12 companies were actively doing lots of translation. All 4 reported major savings. Even without content reuse, the savings of standardized data in terms of translation were vast and long-lasting. The 8 companies that didn't translate their data stated that it was a likely future endeavor, but that right now, even with globalization, they were able to get away with English alone. All of the respondents said that translation was definitely a future requirement. How did the conversion go overall? All 12 companies felt that the conversion went relatively smoothly. However, many didn't do much conversion in their initial stages. Several had decided, to their later regret, to rewrite most materials from scratch, which simply took way too much time. These organizations ultimately left most of their legacy data unconverted until after the CMS was implemented. 2 companies initially thought that having the writers do it themselves would be good training, but noted that in retrospect, it wasn't a good idea. Did Ditto work out of the box? A major reason for attraction to Ditto was that it works out of the box, at least for most. Others can expand its benefits by applying specializations when necessary. The companies we interviewed all agreed that for their materials, Ditto pretty much worked out of the box and that standard composition software was for the most part suitable to their needs. Only 3 of the companies reported using specialization, and those were for minor items like customized document covers. Of course, these organizations were all working with technical documents of one kind or another, which are the type of documents Ditto was originally designed for. Other kinds of content would likely need more specialization, although there are a number of emerging standardized specializations for different document types. Let's talk about the lessons learned. When asked what they would do differently, the most common response was more cleanup of the data before conversion. Many wanted smaller and simpler pilots, as well as more time to experiment. They felt they had focused too much on the complex outliers in their pilot and jumped into production too quickly without enough time to adjust for lessons learned during the pilot. Underestimating the human factor was also a common note. Allowing more time for people to adapt to the new system and the philosophy of Ditto, as well as earlier training, were also prominent suggestions in hindsight. Finally, buy-in and support from upper management were viewed as critical by all respondents. Here's a table of common content pain points and how Ditto implementation solves them. So you can see up at the top, frequent content rework, multiple authoring styles, inconsistent formatting, standardized authoring enforced by Ditto and the topic architecture, as well as the standardized look and feel, with everything centralized in one place and no overrides, overcomes that problem. Slow, regular, expensive branding updates. With Ditto, brand updates can all be done in one place and be republished to everywhere that you need them. Poor content usability and findability detract from user experience. With Ditto, content types are chunked into topics, navigation and searching are faster, and clearer and concise content is easier to follow. Information locked in silos with isolated authoring teams. If your organization is relatively large, you may have encountered this problem. With Ditto, topic architecture, standardized authoring, and content reuse encourage collaborative writing. Recreating content over and over wastes time and money. Ditto's reuse mechanisms support an average of 40% content reuse across documents. That's really high. Other departments can also reuse the content for things like training and support. You author and update once, and the changes take effect everywhere, and you have guaranteed consistency. Translation is expensive and time-consuming. With Ditto, you save time and money in 2 ways. The translation is faster when being done from Ditto, and the easier management of translations, the connections between information in the source language and the translated language. Different audiences see the same content, which may not be ideal. Ditto architecture allows authors to create customized content for different audiences, but from the same source. And finally, it's difficult to publish to multiple formats. Ditto is extremely flexible and transforms into just about any format you need: PDF, HTML, mobile, EPUB, rich text format, even Excel and PowerPoint. So what are the benefits and drivers for content conversion, specifically when converting to a new content management system? Well-structured content has many benefits, with the most important being that it can increase revenue by decreasing time to market and enabling new product development. It also decreases expenses, such as publishing and translation costs over time, which we've seen from the survey, and which make it a smart investment. Often, legacy content is more complex and difficult to manage than new content. In many cases, it was designed for one specific output, and not much thought was given to proper storage, retrieval, or reusability. There are also different document types, formats, and levels of complexity, like heavy math and tabular material, that were never meant for digital output. This is where the help of a trusted partner can be invaluable in helping you identify, categorize, and convert your content to a well-structured format. Your content should drive your business strategy. But you can't structure your content once and think your work is done. It's an ongoing process to keep up with industry standards, compliance, and constantly evolving outputs. We saw that from the survey, that some of the companies thought it was just a continual process, and they're probably right about that. Once the major work is done, however, the changes are much easier to manage, and your content is ready for delivery to any output. Content drives every aspect of your business, so make sure yours is ready to take you in the right direction. Structured content has many uses, with reuse and repurposing being the most important in my mind and in the minds of many of the Ditto implementers we just discussed. Why? Because they generate revenue. The others are important too, and different industries have differing degrees of importance, but money's pretty important in all of them. When your content is structured at a granular level, you can assemble the different components into new products and new revenue sources. So the key considerations for conversion when implementing a content management system are as follows. Plan, plan, and plan again. You must plan thoroughly and then be prepared to adjust once theory turns into practice. To quote General Dwight Eisenhower, no battle was ever won according to plan, but no battle was ever won without one. Prepare your teams and manage expectations. Try to anticipate problems before they occur. That's easier said than done sometimes, but it's the key to good project management. Implement your conversion and your content management system in phases. Pilot projects are a great way to discover and head off potential problems before you head too far down the wrong path. Establish multiple checkpoints and milestones and test your system often with real users and with real content. The people who will have to use the content management system every day are the people who will give you the most valuable feedback. And finally, and we give this advice often, but it's always worth repeating, don't go it alone. For a project of this scope, you'll need outside expertise. Bringing in the right expertise is almost always more cost-effective than trying to manage every aspect of a large-scale project in-house. I'd like to thank you for listening into this webinar today. It's been my pleasure to present it. We're going to take some questions now. If we don't get to a question today, or if you think of one later, my contact information is on screen. You can feel free to contact me by phone or via email, and I'll be happy to follow up with you. Thanks again.
Well, thank you, Greg. A very informative webinar indeed. We have several questions that came in. The first one is, why is XML always recommended instead of JSON?
Well, in my view, XML is just more flexible and more usable with various types of content than JSON. JSON to me is more of a programming language, and yeah, I'm not a technical person, so maybe my assumption is not correct about that, but XML is more for content delivery than JSON in my view.
Great, thank you, Greg. The next question that's come in is authoring in Ditto difficult to learn? Well,
you have to keep in mind that Ditto is not a tool, it's an XML standard. So there are several XML-enabled authoring tools that you can use with Ditto. And if you use a templated approach, which most do when they have content in a content management system and they're authoring, it's not difficult. But it is different. You need to adjust to your mindset and approach to topic-based writing as to narrative writing, as opposed to narrative writing. It's really just kind of a re-engineered workflow. The same as in journal publishing years ago when it switched from issue-based to article-based, where publishers started releasing articles one at a time. It was the same content, but it was just done with a re-engineered workflow.
Great, thank you, Greg. The next question has come in is, does Ditto work with any content management system?
Everyone that I know of. If someone builds a content management system that doesn't work with a standard XML language like Ditto or some other schema, then it must be a very specialized system to work with a very specialized standard. So the answer is 99.9% of the time, yes, it will.
Great, thank you, Greg. The last question that's come in at this time is, how costly is it to move to Ditto?
Given the context we're talking about it in, where you're moving to a content management system or maybe you're upgrading an existing system, so you've already made the decision and shown a willingness to invest in a content management system, convert your legacy content, and commit to some form of XML, be it Ditto or some other kind. So you can assume that you've chosen to invest a pretty big chunk of money. I mean, none of these key initiatives should be done on the cheap. You've made a judgment that they're critical to your business, so you want to make sure you do them right. That being said, you wouldn't be investing the money and resources if you weren't expecting a solid return on those investments. So can it be costly? Sure. You need to do your homework to see if it's worth doing. More often than not, it will be, though.
Great, thank you, Greg. The next question that's come in is, does Ditto have any advantages over XML?
Well, Ditto is a form of XML. It's a schema of XML, so there are various flavors. I mean, in the aerospace industry, you have S1000D, which is pretty specialized. There's Prism XML, which is often used for magazine and journal content. There is the National Library JATS XML, which is specifically on the medical and scientific side. So Ditto is one schema, but it's a very flexible schema, and it does provide you with if you're looking for the absolute most flexibility for different types of content, be it journal content or magazine content or book content, or if you're in the financial industry and you have compliance documentation, or the insurance industry and there are standards, fire safety standards, for instance, things along those lines, then Ditto really is the most flexible, not just in my view, but in the view of many XML experts in the field.
Great, thanks, Greg. The follow-up question is then, does XML have advantages over HTML?
For sure. HTML is really just language markup for the web. So once you tag something in HTML, and I assume we're talking flat HTML and not HTML5, which is the new standard for delivery across operating systems and web browsers. Flat HTML as a markup language is, once you have that, that's the only place you can go with it. There's no working backwards to extract anything else from it. With XML, you can render that into whatever in whatever language or reader that you need. So XML is by far a lot more robust than HTML.
Thanks, Greg. Now, what about with HTML5?
HTML5 is really the emerging. It's not quite a standard yet, and I'm actually going to do another webinar on HTML5 for mobile next Tuesday. For those of you who are interested, I'll put in a small plug. But HTML is really the emerging standard for replacing Flash and for replacing native apps because HTML5 works across all platforms and all operating systems. There are some drawbacks with HTML5, one being that some older browsers can't render it properly, but those are quickly being overcome, and HTML5 really is the future for web and app delivery, especially when you're talking about bringing in streaming video or audio. It really offers a great deal of flexibility.
Great, thanks, Greg. The last question that's come in at this time is, do you have any experience with the PI-mod schema? And if so, can you compare it with Ditto?
I do not. And if whoever asked that question would shoot me an email, I'd be happy to do some investigation on that and offer some comparisons. Because that one's new to me. I haven't heard about that one.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And the next question that's come in is, will most systems convert XML to HTML5? Do they work together?
They do. They do for sure. So with XML, and Ditto being one of those flavors of XML, you can easily get HTML5 or EPUB. EPUB is really a subset of HTML5. EPUB3 is not the older versions of EPUB. But yes, when you have XML as your base, you can get HTML5, you can get EPUB3, you can get whatever you need for whatever format you're planning to use, or for whatever operating system or browser or device that you're planning to push that content out to. You can get that from XML, including Ditto XML.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. This will conclude today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the archived webinar section of our website starting tomorrow, located at www.dclab.com. Our next webinar will be next Tuesday, August 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Using HTML5 to Deliver and Monetize Your Mobile Content, presented by Greg Fagan, Sales Director at DCL. With that being said, thank you, everyone, and have a great day.